5 o'clock in the morning. The phone blared on the nightstand, interrupting the gentle lapping of the waves outside the window. I glanced at the screen. Lionel Banks, the building security guard. My heart quickened, but not from fear. Instead, it was because of the moment I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Wallace, there's something." Lionel's voice trembled. "Your daughter-in-law is standing in the lobby with 3 large men. They brought a moving truck. She says she's the new owner of the apartment and wants to move things out." I propped myself up with my hand, the soft blanket sliding down in rhythm. The sea breeze from Long Beach wafted in, salty and just cool enough to clear my head. The sky in the distance was gradually shifting to the pale pink of dawn. "Let her in, Lionel." I spoke with surprising calmness. "Don't stop her." "But Mrs. Just let her in." I cut him off, my voice steady as if reading a script. "Just make sure she signs her full name and ID number in the ledger. Understood?" A moment of silence. Then Lionel softly replied, "Yes, ma'am." I hung up and immediately opened the app on my phone. The screen displayed 8 camera feeds, the surveillance system I had installed 3 weeks prior. No one knew. Not Marcus, not Nyla Carter, not even Gloria. My friend of 40 years was aware. The tiny cameras were embedded discreetly in every corner of the Upper West Side apartment: the living room, kitchen, master bedroom, and the entrance. All were live streaming and automatically saving to the cloud. The images appeared sharp. Nyla stood in the lobby, talking to the 3 movers. One held a stack of cardboard boxes, one stared intently at a piece of paper, and the other checked the equipment. Nyla's hair was tied up in a bun, dressed in athletic wear as if ready for a workout, but her face was completely different, tense, rushed, and calculated. She waved at Lionel. Though I couldn't hear the sound, I clearly read her lips. "This is my right. It belongs to me now." I switched to the camera in the 10th floor hallway. Still quiet. The door to my apartment was closed tightly. Everything was intact. Returning to the lobby camera, Nyla stepped into the elevator with the 3 men. Lionel remained behind, worry clearly etched on his face. He's a good man. He'd worked in the building since I moved in 10 years ago, always asking about my health. I took a deep breath. My heart was still pounding, but not from panic. Rather, it was from the feeling that, for the first time in a very long time, I was in control. The elevator moved. 6th floor, 7th floor, 8th floor, 9th floor. My apartment is on the 10th floor. The elevator door opened. Nyla stepped out first, striding quickly. The 3 men followed closely behind. She headed straight for my apartment door, rummaged through her handbag, and then pulled out a key. My key. The hallway camera recorded her every move. Nyla inserted the key into the lock, turning it with the same confidence as if it were her own home. The door opened. They went inside. The lights turned on. I switched to the interior camera. Here they are. All of them had entered my home, and from this moment on, their every action, their every word was being recorded, clearly from multiple angles, undeniably. Meanwhile, along First Avenue, the police had been dispatched. My lawyer, Monique Ellison, had also received an automatic alert 2 minutes ago. I leaned back against the pillow, the phone still in my hand, watching the stream of images on the screen with a feeling I hadn't had for many months. Control. But for you to understand why this moment is so important, I need to tell the story from the beginning, the story of how a 62-year-old woman, me, had once nearly lost everything, and how I got up to win back every single thing. If you're ready to step into part 2, where everything began to slide downhill, keep listening to my story. It all started 6 months ago. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was at the salon with Gloria Reed, my friend of 40 years. It was our weekly routine. We'd get our hair and nails done and talk about everything under the sun. Both of us were widows. We met through a walking group in Central Park and somehow became soul friends. The phone rang. Marcus, my son. "Mom, I have something to tell you." His voice was full of excitement. "I met someone. Her name is Nyla. We've been seeing each other for 3 months, and I think she's the one I've been searching for." I sat frozen under the hairdryer. 3 months. And I hadn't heard about her even once, but I swallowed all my questions, trying to keep my voice light. "That's wonderful, dear." "I'm happy for you." Marcus invited me and Gloria to dinner on Saturday to meet Nyla. I agreed immediately. Marcus was the only child I had raised alone for 13 years since my husband passed away from a heart attack. My entire life was wrapped up in his peace and happiness. That Saturday evening, I arrived at Marcus's apartment with a bottle of wine and the cake he had loved since childhood. Gloria came along. She always said I needed a witness for important events. Nyla opened the door. She was younger than I expected. I later learned she was 32, close to Marcus's age. Tall, slender, dressed in expensive clothes, long black hair, sharp makeup. Her smile was wide, too wide, making it slightly forced. "Renee!" "Finally, I get to meet you. Marcus talks about you all the time." She hugged me. The embrace was too tight, the perfume too strong. Marcus's apartment looked completely different. It had been fully redecorated. Bright throw pillows, new paintings, scented candles, a cloth-covered dining table. I had never seen Marcus do these kinds of things. "Doesn't Nyla have great taste, Mom?" Marcus was so happy he almost waited for my compliment. I smiled. "It's very beautiful." Dinner proceeded. Nyla cooked quite well, and the presentation was lovely. She spoke a lot about her job, her dream of starting her own company, and how wonderful Marcus was. Occasionally, she would turn to me. "It must be hard living alone in such a big apartment." "At your age, worries are normal. Don't you get lonely?" I was 62, not 82. I worked part-time, went to the gym, drove, and traveled. I didn't feel helpless, but the way she spoke made me feel boxed into a fragile role that wasn't mine at all. Marcus started repeating exactly what Nyla said. "Mom, you look a little tired." "Is it safe to live alone?" "You should think about the future. Maybe you need to live in a smaller place." Each sentence was small, but they accumulated into the feeling that someone was trying to push me into the old mother who needs guardianship box. At this point, I want you to remember one thing. I didn't know then that I was stepping into a trap so meticulously designed that even the most cautious person would struggle to recognize it. And Nyla hadn't fully revealed her true colors yet, but the first sign appeared immediately afterward. A month passed, and Nyla appeared in my life more than necessary. Phone calls, texts checking in, and surprise visits with Marcus, always with a tone of genuine concern. One day she made herbal tea to help with relaxation. It tasted of mint mixed with something bitter. I took a few sips out of politeness. Half an hour later, I was so dizzy that Gloria had to drive me home. "I don't like her," Gloria said. The tea smelled strange. I stayed silent. I didn't want to be the suspicious mother-in-law type who always thought no one was good enough for her son. A few weeks later, Marcus announced they were getting married in 3 months, a small wedding, and of course, I would contribute to some of the costs. I gave Marcus $5,000 from my years of savings. The wedding was beautiful. I smiled in the photos. I hugged Marcus. I welcomed Nyla into the family, until I heard that. I was in the restroom touching up my lipstick when I overheard Nyla talking to a friend. "This marriage is the best investment I've ever made. Marcus is so easy to persuade. That old woman with money owns the $200,000 apartment, the beach house, the savings. It will all belong to us eventually. Just need more time, and she'll be begging us for help." I stood paralyzed, my hands gripping the sink until my knuckles turned white. That night, returning to my Long Beach beach house, I made a decision. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't let anyone take what I had built all my life. I wouldn't allow anyone to push me into the frail and helpless position. I called Monique Ellison, my lawyer and longtime friend. I told her everything. Nyla, the sweet fake words. how Marcus was being manipulated, even the story in the restroom. "Renee," Monique said, her voice calm, "you have to protect yourself, and you need evidence. If this goes to court, your word alone won't be enough. She'll say you're paranoid, or that your age is making you confused." And that was the moment Monique said those words. That was when everything truly began. "Cameras!" Monique said immediately when I picked up the phone. "Renee, you need to install cameras in the apartment." 3 days after the wedding, we met in a small cafe on Fifth Avenue. Monique brought a thick file filled with documents about elder rights and something she called a defensive plan. I frowned. "It's my home. I can't turn it into a surveillance site." Monique adjusted her glasses and looked straight at me. "Renee, if Nyla truly intends to do what you overheard that day, she will continue. And when things escalate, we must have irrefutable proof. In the courtroom, they will say you were mistaken, you misremembered, or worse, you are no longer mentally sound. Your word alone is not enough." I squeezed the coffee cup tightly. The bitterness spread in my mouth, but perhaps it was the taste of worry more than coffee. "What kind of cameras?" I asked. Monique smiled slightly. "Small, wireless ones, with clear audio recording, motion-activated, connected directly to your phone, and perfectly legal. That house is yours." That evening, I leaned against the window of my Upper West Side apartment, looking down at a corner of Central Park. I used to think this was my safest place. I had lost my husband, lost my youth, but I rebuilt everything from scratch. Every item in this apartment was a part of my life, yet now I had to turn it into a trap. I went online and ordered a set of 6 wireless cameras. 2 days later, I spent the entire afternoon installing them. The living room, hidden behind the photo frame of Marcus's graduation day. The kitchen, placed on top of the refrigerator among some decorative cereal boxes. The bedroom, disguised within the bookshelf. The dining room, concealed in a fake potted plant. The home office, behind a stack of books. The entrance, inside a new smoke detector. I downloaded the app and checked each camera. The images were so clear I could see every speck of dust on the table. But there was one more thing I had to do. I called a locksmith. He arrived the next morning, gray-haired, with nimble hands. I gave him a brief explanation. An hour later, I had a brand new lock system, hidden behind the old one. From the outside, no one would know. The old key, the one I was sure Nyla had duplicated, was now useless. "Why not just replace the whole lock?" the locksmith asked. "Because I want them to think they can still get in," I replied. And he nodded, as if he understood everything. 2 days later, while I was standing in the supermarket, my phone vibrated. Notification. Motion detected in the living room. I opened the app. Nyla. She walked around the living room as if it were her own home. She opened drawers, took pictures of documents, then went straight into the bedroom, opened the closet, rummaged through the jewelry box, and took the ring my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. I froze in the supermarket aisle. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. No more doubt, no more maybe, no more "I'm being too sensitive." Nyla stayed there for almost 20 minutes. She searched every nook and cranny as if she were taking inventory of my assets. When she left the apartment, I slumped down onto the supermarket floor. People stared at me, but I didn't care. That evening, Marcus called. "Mom, Nyla said you weren't friendly to her." I took a deep breath. "Marcus, how did Nyla get into my apartment today?" Silence. "What are you talking about?" "I have cameras. I saw her in the living room, the bedroom, going through my things, and taking a ring." Marcus choked up. "Since when do you have cameras? Are you spying on your own family? You are being paranoid. You need to see a doctor." So, there it was. They wanted me to be deemed incompetent. How convenient. "Marcus, I am perfectly lucid, and I have proof I'm not listening anymore," Marcus said coldly. "If you can't accept Nyla, maybe we should have some distance." The phone disconnected. I sat there, looking at the dark screen, feeling a cold wind blow through my chest. My only son had just chosen a woman he had known for a few months over the mother who raised him for 13 years. But I didn't give up. I sent the video to Monique. "Perfect," she said. "We have enough for trespassing and theft. But be patient. She will continue. The more we let her act, the more leverage we have." Patience. That was the hardest advice, but I followed it. And just as Monique predicted, when a person thinks they are winning, they often expose their own weakness. What came next? I'll never forget it. A public humiliation. It was so intricately staged that if I hadn't prepared beforehand, I might have completely collapsed. 2 weeks later, Nyla called. "Renee, this Sunday we're having a family lunch. Remember to bring the beach house documents. Marcus and I want to help you organize them because the taxes at your age are very complicated." I clearly saw the trap, but I kept my voice normal. "Okay, Nyla." Sunday, I arrived on time. Their apartment was crowded. Nyla's mother, her brother, and another couple I had never met. Nyla was smiling, perfect as always. "Renee, so glad you could make it." I sat down, quietly observing. After lunch, Nyla set down her glass and changed her tone. "All right, since we're family, Marcus and I want to talk about something important. Regarding your mental well-being, all eyes turned toward me, and the trap, finally, snapped shut. Lately we've noticed you've been quite forgetful," Nyla started in a gentle voice. "You mix up dates, and you called me saying it was Thursday when it was actually Sunday." That was a lie. "And you're very paranoid," she continued. "You installed cameras because you think someone is monitoring you. You accuse us of things that never happened." Nyla's mother sighed pitifully. "It's that age. It's normal." My mother was the same before she went into the nursing home. I kept my voice calm. "I am not confused. I installed cameras because someone entered my house without permission." Nyla tilted her head, her smile patient, as if humoring a child. "Renee, I did visit because you said I could come get the book you loaned me. Don't you remember? I never loaned you a book." Nyla turned to everyone. "See, everyone? She doesn't remember." Marcus interjected. "Mom, we're worried. Living alone in such a big apartment is no longer safe. You even slipped and fell in the bathroom once." "I never fell." "You told me on the phone 2 weeks ago." Another untruth. Nyla's brother chimed in. "My grandmother also started by denying things, then came getting lost, forgetting addresses." I stood up. "I will not sit here and listen to groundless accusations." Nyla also stood up, changing her tone. "Sit down. This is important. We love you and we want to help. This is the solution we've prepared." She pulled out a packet of papers. "Voluntary guardianship. You agree to let us manage your affairs for you. You will be at peace, with nothing to worry about." I looked at the documents, then at Marcus, the son I raised for 13 years after my husband died. He wouldn't look me in the eye. "I will not sign." For a moment, Nyla's mask dropped. Anger flashed and then vanished. "If you don't sign, we will proceed with legal action. We have witnesses." She glanced around the room. "The court will order a psychological evaluation. And when they conclude you are no longer competent, a guardian will be appointed. It's better if it's family, isn't it?" The trap was perfect. Sign and lose everything. Don't sign and be forced. "I need to use the restroom," I said. "Of course," Nyla smiled. "First door on the left." In the restroom, I locked the door and messaged Monique. "They are forcing me to sign guardianship papers. They have fake witnesses. Need immediate help." The response came instantly. "Do not sign. Leave immediately. I'm initiating legal action. We have the recordings. This is coercion." I splashed water on my face, looking straight into the mirror, a 62-year-old woman, tired, scared, but not defeated. I stepped out. The room was deathly quiet. "I will not sign. If you continue to coerce me,
My lawyer will sue for coercion and fraud." Nyla snapped, "What fraud? I know you entered my house without permission. I know you took my 20-year anniversary ring. I know you're fabricating stories to make me look incompetent. And I have proof." The silence was thick. Marcus's voice was hoarse. "What are you talking about? Ask your wife about the gold ring in my jewelry box 2 weeks ago. Ask her about the pictures she took of my documents. Ask her about how she talks about my apartment as if it already belongs to her." Nyla gave a bitter laugh. "See, Elijah? She's paranoid. I have video and audio recordings saved to the cloud. My lawyer already has copies." I looked at Marcus. "I love you. But your wife married you for money, my assets. She wants to incapacitate me to take everything." "That's not true," Nyla retorted. "Marcus, don't listen to her. She's ill." But Marcus looked at me differently, as if he finally saw something that had been there all along. I picked up my bag. "I'm leaving. And the next time anyone enters my home without my permission, I will call the police." No one stopped me.
In the elevator, my hands were still shaking. I had laid my cards on the table, but there was no other choice. In the parking lot, Gloria called. "How was lunch?" "Horrible. I'll tell you later." "Are you okay?" "Not yet, but I will be." I drove straight to my beach house in Long Beach. I needed distance, time to think, time to prepare. Because now Nyla knew that I knew. And desperate people do desperate things. That night, I called Monique. "I need immediate legal protection." The next day, she brought a stack of files all the way to Long Beach. We sat on the porch, the sound of the waves steady, and she went through the steps. Step 1, get a psychological evaluation from a certified specialist. We need the latest documentation proving you are completely lucid. How long will that take? 1 to 2 weeks, a few tests and interviews. It's critical. When Nyla fabricates stories, we hit them directly with medical evidence. Next, update your will. Install safety measures. No assets can be sold or transferred without a notarized authorization from you and 2 independent witnesses. Bulletproof everything. The bank? Open a new account at a different bank. Only you have access. Don't tell Marcus. Move all your savings there. And the beach house? It's in your name alone. Good. Document that clearly, and install cameras here too. In the following days, I followed every step precisely. The forensic psychologist, Dr. Kendra Briggs, conducted a comprehensive assessment. Memory, reasoning, time, and spatial orientation, lifestyle, financial decision-making. Thorough and exhausting, but the conclusion was clear. Mrs. Wallace is completely competent. There are no signs of decline. I will write a full report and am ready to testify. I walked out relieved, but still angry. Why did I have to prove my sanity to my own family? I opened a new account, transferred all my savings, over $53,000 there. I updated my will. If anything happened to me, the apartment and the beach house would be sold, and the money placed into a fund supporting older women. Marcus would receive nothing as long as he remained married to Nyla. Monique would serve as the executor. Drastic, I admitted as I signed. Smart, Monique said. Later, when things are better, you can change it back. I installed more cameras at the beach house, changed the locks, and warned the neighbors not to let anyone in without my direct confirmation. And then, something I never thought Nyla would dare to do, happened. When a predator sees the prey slipping away, they don't give up. They launch a bigger attack. A week later, Nyla made her move, and this time it was no longer just words. During those days, Marcus called constantly. I didn't answer. I needed to finalize everything first. Nyla also left numerous voicemails. Initially, they were sweet and gentle. Renee, please pick up. What happened on Sunday was just a misunderstanding. Then her tone shifted. You can't hide forever. We need to resolve this. Finally, the threat became evident. If you don't talk, we will proceed legally for your own good." I saved everything, every text message, every recording. A week later, I returned to the city and met Monique at her office. She looked serious. "Renee, Nyla's mother and brother have filed a petition with the court to assess your competency, accusing you of being a danger to yourself. Can they do that? They can try. But we have your psychological evaluation, the camera videos, and evidence of Nyla's trespassing and theft. When presented to the judge, their case will collapse. When is the hearing? In 2 weeks. But before that, you need to see this." Monique opened her laptop. A video clip from 3 days ago, when I was at the beach house. Nyla appeared with a tall, thin man holding a briefcase. They walked through the apartment, the man taking notes and photos as if appraising the property. "Real estate agent," Monique stated. "Nyla is planning to sell your apartment." "My apartment? She can't do that without my signature, not legally." Listen to what they're saying. The volume increased. Nyla's voice. "The apartment is worth about $200,000. My mother-in-law is about to enter a nursing home, so we need a quick sale." The agent asked, "The paperwork?" "Almost done. Once guardianship is obtained, we'll proceed immediately." "Does she agree?" Nyla laughed. "She's not in a state to agree or not. Don't worry, everything will be legal." The screen went dark. Coldness. "There's more." Monique opened an audio file. Nyla's voice. "I found the perfect nursing home, $1,000 a month. Selling the apartment will cover many years. We'll keep the beach house, maybe use it or sell it later, around $100,000. Easy money." A man's voice. Elijah. "What if she resists?" "With guardianship, she has no voice. And if she makes a scene, it will only prove she's insane." Perfect. I closed my eyes. Monique switched to a third video, a week ago in my kitchen. Nyla opened the spice cabinet, took a small vial from her handbag, poured it into the sugar container, stirred, put the empty vial away, and left. "What is that?" "We don't know yet." "Do you still have the sugar container?" "I've been away all week." "Good. We'll get a sample and send it to the lab right away." We put on gloves, went to the house, took a sample, and sealed it. Monique said, "Results in 48 hours." The 48 hours of waiting felt as long as a winter season. Every cup of coffee, every spoon of sugar before suddenly became a needle stuck in my memory. Dizziness, staggering, confusion. If it weren't for the cameras, I might have started doubting myself. The phone rang. Monique. "High-dose benzodiazepines. Causes dizziness, short-term memory loss, and simulates dementia if used long-term." I sat down very slowly. "She was poisoning me." "Yes, and we have the video. This is no longer just financial manipulation. This is a criminal act." That night, alone at the beach house, I watched the waves crash. I thought about Marcus, the baby I held in the hospital, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the young man I saw off at graduation. What did I teach him? Perhaps I didn't teach him enough about the boundary between love and manipulation, between loyalty and blindness. Marcus's text message came, "Mom, Nyla says you put the drug in the sugar yourself to frame her. I don't know who to believe. Please talk to me." I read it several times. I hadn't replied. Not yet. 2 days later, the final straw broke. I was having lunch with Gloria near Lincoln Center when my phone alerted me. Motion detected at the apartment. I opened the app. Nyla was standing in the lobby with 3 men in moving uniforms. A truck was parked outside. "No," I muttered. Gloria looked at the screen, squeezing my hand. Nyla was talking to Lionel Banks. He nodded reluctantly. "She's about to break into my house," I jumped up. "Call the police," Gloria said. "I'll call Monique." Monique answered immediately. "Nyla is bringing movers to my apartment." "Don't do anything." "Are the cameras recording everything?" "Yes." "Good. I'm calling the police. You stay put. Let everything unfold. This is the missing piece." I sat back down, eyes glued to the screen. Nyla and the 3 men got into the elevator, heading up to the 10th floor. Nyla took out the key, tried the old lock. It didn't open. Tried again. Still no. She impatiently made a call, then ordered them to pry the lock. The door burst open. They rushed in. Nyla pointed. "Take the sofa first. Be careful with those vases. They're expensive." 3 camera angles recorded everything. Somewhere on First Avenue, police sirens were wailing. I watched her search the bedroom, gather more jewelry, and call someone to boast, even revealing the tea, the sugar, the plan. "The old woman was too stupid to protect herself," Nyla said on the phone. The sirens grew closer. Nyla ran to the window, her face pale. She looked for a way out, and the police burst in. Handcuffs snapped shut. They escorted her out of my apartment, out of my life. Gloria squeezed my hand. "It's over." I shook my head. "No. This is only the beginning." Nyla Carter was arrested at 5:37 a.m. on October 15th and spent the night at the Lower Manhattan Precinct. The bail hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. Monique instructed me to appear. "They need to see you lucid and proactive, not the image of the confused old woman Nyla tried to paint." That morning, I chose a gray suit, a white shirt, and closed-toe flats, neat and dignified. Gloria accompanied me, holding my hand all the way to the New York Supreme Court on Center Street. "Are you sure?" she asked when the car stopped in front of the solid yellow stone building. "I have to do this." The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Hard wooden benches, cold fluorescent lights, the smell of floor polish and old paper. When they brought Nyla in, I almost didn't recognize her. No makeup, messy hair, an orange prison uniform. She looked small, but her eyes still held a cold glint. Marcus sat in the back row, red-eyed and disheveled. He looked at me as if pleading for help. I turned away. Judge Patrice Howard, in her 50s, with gray hair and a concise voice, opened the file. "Ms. Nyla Carter, the defendant is charged with criminal trespass, grand larceny, falsifying documents, and attempted felonious assault, poisoning. How does the defendant plead?" Nyla's lawyer, a young man, stood up. "Not guilty. My client had the right to enter the apartment. Her mother-in-law is cognitively impaired and had given verbal permission." The judge frowned. "Evidence of this verbal permission? Not available at this time. Then it's irrelevant." Prosecutor Andre Howell rose, his voice loud and articulate. "We possess video and audio recordings of the defendant unlawfully breaking into Mrs. Renee Wallace's apartment, a confession regarding the mixture of tranquilizers, lab analysis confirming benzodiazepines in the sugar container, and third-party witnesses to the forced entry and lock-picking." The judge questioned Nyla. She trembled. "It was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I love my mother-in-law. She is confused. The recordings were edited. The lab made a mistake." The judge flipped through the file. The defendant also actively petitioned for guardianship, accusing the victim of incompetence. Meanwhile, Dr. Kendra Briggs concluded that Mrs. Wallace is completely lucid. "Your explanation?" Nyla stammered, "The doctor could be wrong. Or she tricked them. My mother-in-law is very manipulative." The judge closed the file. "I have heard enough. Bail is denied. Given the seriousness of the charges, especially the act of poisoning, the defendant is to be remanded until the trial date." Nyla burst into tears, turning around. "Marcus! Do something." Marcus stood up. "Your Honor, my wife is not—" "Are you the victim's son?" "Yes." "Were you aware of your wife's actions?" Marcus froze. I just thought Mom needed help." "The prosecutor's office will consider the extent of your involvement. I advise you to hire a lawyer." They handcuffed Nyla and led her away. She screamed, blaming everyone, from me to Marcus to the system, except herself. In the hallway, Marcus chased after me. "Mom, please wait." I looked him straight in the eye. "Did you know about the poison? The plan to sell the apartment? The nursing home?" He shook his head, avoiding my gaze. "She said you were sick. I believed her." "You believed a wife you'd known for a few months over the mother who raised you for 13 years. He burst into tears. "I'm sorry. Marcus, I was nearly sent to a nursing home. Your wife poisoned me and made me doubt myself. Every time I warned you, you called me paranoid. You might not have known how far it would go, but your silence enabled her." Gloria touched my arm. "Renee, let's go." I looked at Marcus one last time. "When you truly understand the consequences of your actions, then we can talk. Right now, I need distance." I turned away. 3 months of preparation passed in rare tranquility at the beach house. Gloria visited every weekend. The walking group, Sharon, Tanya, called to check in, sending pictures of their daily lives. These small gestures pulled me out of the darkness. I returned to the gym, joined a yoga class, and cut my hair short, a change I owed myself for a long time. Marcus still called. I wasn't ready to answer, and I learned to accept that. On the official trial date, I arrived early in a pale blue dress, simple yet resolute. The courtroom was packed, including the press, the story of an elderly woman defending herself against a manipulative daughter-in-law garnered significant public interest. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The evidence was presented sequentially. Video footage, Nyla confessing to the tranquilizer, rummaging through drawers, collecting valuables. Lab report, a dose of benzodiazepines sufficient to cause memory disturbance, disorientation, and easily mistaken for decline. Dr. Briggs' testimony, I was fully competent with no cognitive impairment. Lionel Banks. Confirming Nyla and the moving team arrived claiming to be the new owners. A mover testifying that Nyla paid $3,000 to force the door open and showed them falsified documents. It was my turn. I swore to tell the truth, facing a room that knew too much about my life. Prosecutor Howell asked about Marcus, meeting Nyla, the changes, the dizziness, the feeling of being manipulated. "She made me doubt myself," I said, my voice calm. "She made me believe that age meant incompetence." I almost accepted that I looked at the jury, but 62 years old does not make me helpless. Being a widow does not make me vulnerable. I have worked my entire life, raised my son alone, purchased my own assets. No one has the right to take that away, or to make me feel small. Nyla's lawyer tried to deflect. Age, medication, or forgetfulness. With every question, I answered directly, supported by my medical records and psychological evaluation. He quickly ran out of options. The jury deliberated. 3 hours later, they returned. Guilty, on all counts. Sentencing was 1 week later. 5 years for trespass, larceny, and forgery. 3 years for attempted felonious assault, poisoning. A total of 8 years. It wasn't gloating, it was closure. My truth was recognized, my dignity protected. Outside the court, the press gathered. Monique made a brief statement. We were satisfied, and hoped the case served as a reminder that older adults have the right to self-determination. A reporter asked what I would say to women in similar situations. I looked straight into the camera. If something feels wrong, trust your gut. Age does not take away your voice. You have the right to say no. You have the right to set boundaries, even with family. That evening, on the porch of the beach house, the sky was scattered with stars, the waves lapping steadily. My phone vibrated, a message from Marcus. "Mom, I saw the verdict. You were right. I'm filing for divorce. I'm sorry for everything. I love you. When you're ready, I'm here." I read it several times. Something softened in my chest. Not forgiveness yet, but the possibility of it. I didn't reply. I saved the message. Justice had been served, but healing has no court order. When the gavel fell, the question that remained was, What would I do with the space that had just opened up? And with the son who was learning to stand on the side of the truth? The months following the trial were a journey of learning how to live again. It sounds simple, but it was anything but. After months of manipulation, of being pushed to the point of doubting my own reality, after witnessing my son choose a stranger over his mother, finding myself again couldn't happen overnight. I stayed at the Long Beach beach house for the entire first month. Gloria came to stay with me for 2 weeks. We walked on the beach every morning, barefoot on the wet sand, letting the waves wash over our ankles. Sometimes we talked nonstop. Other times, we just stayed silent to listen to the rhythm of the ocean. "Are you planning to go back to Manhattan?" Gloria asked one morning as we sat on the porch with our steaming cups of coffee. "Eventually, yes," I replied, "but not that apartment." The Upper West Side apartment, where I had lived for 10 years, where I recovered after my husband's death, was now filled with dark memories. Nyla rummaging through drawers, mixing tranquilizers into the sugar, planning my future as if I had already vanished. "Are you going to sell it?" Gloria asked. "Yes, and buy a new place, a new start. Before doing that, I needed to face the invisible wounds." Monique introduced me to a therapist, Dr. Patricia Chen, a Chinese-American woman in her mid-40s, specializing in trauma and elder abuse. The first session, I sat on the soft sofa in her Upper East Side office, unsure where to begin. "Tell me about the moment you realized something was wrong," Dr. Chen said, her voice warm and slow. And I told her about the cup of tea, about the casual remarks on my age, about the feeling of gradually shrinking, being erased, being turned into an invisible being. I hadn't intended to cry, but when I spoke of the moment I looked at myself in the mirror and wondered if I was losing my mind, the tears flowed out. "They made me believe I was crazy," my voice cracked. "My son, the boy I raised, looked at me like I was a burden, a problem." Dr. Chen handed me a box of tissues. "That's called gaslighting," she explained. "A form of psychological abuse where the manipulator makes the victim doubt their own perceptions, memory, or sanity. With older women, it's even more effective because society is already primed to doubt them." "What do you mean?" "It means we live in a culture that defaults to associating old with decline. When an older woman says, 'I'm being manipulated,' people are quicker to think she's confused than, 'Let's investigate.' Nyla understood this and used ageism as a weapon. For the first time, I had a name for my experience. Not just financial fraud or poisoning, but systemic gaslighting, elder abuse, and exploited ageism. In subsequent sessions, Dr. Chen helped me identify patterns. "When did you almost give up?" she asked in the third session. I searched my memory. After Marcus hung up on me, telling me I needed a doctor. That night I sat alone, looking at my medicine cabinet. "What were you thinking?" "That maybe they were right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe disappearing would be easier." The room fell into a heavy silence. "But you didn't," Dr. Chen softly said. "What held you back?" "A message from Gloria. She said the walking group needed me, and I realized I needed them too. I needed to fight, not for them, but for myself." Dr. Chen nodded. "That's the turning point. The moment a victim decides they deserve better. But getting to that point is one thing. Healing is another." She explained PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I immediately denied it, but then she asked, "Do you startle when someone knocks on the door?" "Yes." "Do you check the lock multiple times before sleeping?" "Yes, 5 or 6 times every night." "Do you have nightmares?" "Yes, about a locked white room where everyone unanimously told me I was crazy and no one believed me." "That's PTSD," Dr. Chen said. "Your body is still in survival mode. The threat is over, but your brain hasn't caught up with that belief yet." She taught me deep breathing techniques for panic and grounding exercises, naming 5 things I could see, 4 things I could touch, 3 things I could hear, 2 things I could smell, 1 thing I could taste. And journaling, writing a letter to myself 6 months ago, telling her that everything would be okay. Slowly, very slowly, I began to feel safer. 3 months after the trial, I decided to sell the Upper West Side apartment. I couldn't live there anymore. Every corner brought back betrayal. I looked for a smaller, more modern place near Central Park West, not far from my gym and friends. A place with no history, a place that could be entirely mine. On moving day, Gloria and the walking group came to help, Sharon, Tanya, and 3 others. We boxed things up, donated what wasn't needed, making space for a new beginning. How do I feel? I looked around the empty apartment. 10 years of my life fit into a few cardboard boxes. I feel ready. The new apartment was bright, airy, on the 3rd floor, with a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined street. I decorated it myself. New furniture, vibrant colors, pictures of places I had been, and places I wanted to go. For the first time in months, I felt like I was building instead of just existing. I returned to the gym regularly, went to yoga class, and even tried a Thursday afternoon watercolor painting class. The first painting, a sunset over the ocean, looked like it was done by a 5-year-old, but that was okay. It was mine. My time, my joy. 4 months after the trial, I received an invitation. A nonprofit organization supporting victims of elder abuse wanted me to speak at a fundraiser. Initially, I refused. The story was too close, too painful. Gloria persuaded me, think about the women out there going through what you went through. They need to know they're not alone. I agreed. The event was at a midtown hotel, a large, crowded room. I wore a navy suit, my hair neatly done, light makeup. When it was my turn, I walked onto the stage, looked down at the sea of faces, and told my story. The true version, the tea that made me dizzy, the casual remarks that made me shrink, the discovery that Nyla was poisoning me, the moment I almost believed I was crazy, and the decision to stand up. They wanted me to disappear, I said. They wanted me to be small, silent, easily manageable. They wanted to lock me in a box labeled old woman and forget me. But I am 62, not invisible. I am a widow, not helpless. I am a betrayed mother, but still deserving of respect. I paused. If anyone here is feeling what I once felt, like you're going crazy, like no one believes you, like age has stripped you of your value, please hear me. You are not crazy. You are not exaggerating, and you are not alone. The room gave a standing ovation. More importantly, after the talk, women in their 60s, 70s, and 80s came up to me. They told me stories of children trying to control their money, grandchildren treating them like a burden, the feeling of being invisible in their own families. Please keep fighting, one woman held my hand. You showed us that we can. When justice has done its part, the question that remains is, how do we live with the space that has opened up and turn it into something beneficial for others? On the taxi ride home, Gloria looked at me. I think this is the beginning of something. What? I'm not sure yet, but too many women need this help. The seed was planted then. 2 weeks later, we sat at our usual cafe, opening a laptop. What should we call it? Gloria asked. Silver Voices Consulting, I replied. Accounting and financial management consultation for older women. We smiled. It started small, just the 2 of us, but we were doing what someone should have done for me, helping women, especially widows or those living alone, learn how to protect themselves, understand finances, set boundaries with family, recognize signs of manipulation. We will provide the tools, I said, so they can defend themselves before it's too late. In the midst of building my new life, one relationship still hung in the balance, Marcus. He texted periodically, infrequently but consistently. Mom, I'm thinking of you. I've officially filed for divorce. I've started therapy, trying to understand why I let that happen. I read every message, but hadn't replied. Not yet. Until one day, 6 months after the trial, Marcus sent a handwritten letter to my new address. Monique must have given it to him. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. Inside were 3 pages of familiar handwriting. My dearest Mom, I know a letter cannot mend what has been broken. I know an apology is not enough, but I need to write this even if you never read it. I was wrong. Not just wrong, but blind, selfish, and cruel. I let a stranger convince me that you, the woman who sacrificed everything for me, were suddenly incompetent. I let her ambition overshadow my love for you. The thing that keeps me up every night is this. A part of me wanted to believe her, because it was easier. Easier than admitting I chose wrongly. Easier than confronting my own selfishness. Easier than accepting the truth that old age does not mean weakness. My therapist helped me understand. I didn't save you because I didn't want to see the truth. And in the process, I nearly destroyed you. You taught me integrity, courage, and to stand up for what is right. When the time came, I failed at all 3. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, you saved me by fighting, by refusing to be erased. You showed me what true strength looks like. One day, I hope to be the man you tried to raise. I love you. Always. Marcus. I read the letter 3 times. Tears blurred a few of the words. This wasn't forgiveness yet. Not yet. But it was the beginning of understanding, and perhaps with time that would be enough. I didn't answer Marcus's letter immediately. Instead, I placed it in my desk drawer, taking it out to read every few days. Each reading brought different emotions, sometimes anger, sometimes sadness, and occasionally, very faintly, a glimmer of hope. Dr. Chen said this was completely normal. Forgiveness is not an on-off switch, she said during a therapy session. It's a process. And sometimes that process doesn't lead to complete forgiveness, but to acceptance. Acceptance of what? I asked. That the person who hurt you is still human with their own flaws. That the relationship has permanently changed, and that maintaining distance to protect yourself is okay, even when you still love them. Those words resonated within me. I loved Marcus, always have. But love didn't mean I had to forget what happened. One Thursday afternoon, after my watercolor class, I sat on a bench in Central Park. The April weather was warming up, cherry blossoms were bright pink, families strolled, and children laughed. Life was moving on normally. I opened my contacts, lingered on Marcus's name, and then typed a message. Son, I received your letter. Thank you for writing it. I love you, always will. But love does not erase pain. I need time. I don't know how long it will take. I just don't want you to think I hate you. I don't hate you. I am healing. His reply came quickly. Mom, I understand. I will wait, however long it takes. I love you. Something in my chest eased, not completely resolved, but a step forward. Silver Voices. Consulting, the company Gloria and I founded, grew slowly but steadily. Our first client was Eleanor, 68 years old. Her husband had recently passed away, leaving behind a confusing mess of finances that she had never managed before. My husband took care of everything, she said during our first meeting at the small office near Lincoln Center. Now that he's gone, my son wants me to sign power of attorney over to him. He says it would be simpler, but it feels wrong. Gloria looked at me. Do you want to sign it? I asked. No, but he keeps saying I can't handle it myself, that at my age, she paused. At your age, what? Gloria gently prompted. At my age, I can't understand these things anymore. The familiar phrase, the one used to strip autonomy, to convince women they are helpless. Eleanor, I said, 68 years old doesn't make you less capable. It doesn't stop you from learning, understanding, and making your own decisions. If you want, we will teach you everything, step by step. at your own pace. Her eyes welled up. Truly? Truly. We worked with Eleanor for 6 weeks. Budgeting, investments, reading statements, legal rights, and recognizing signs of financial manipulation. By the 6th week, she walked in with a radiant smile. I told my son I wouldn't sign. I also opened a separate account only in my name. He wasn't happy, but I don't care. This is my money and my life. Gloria hugged her. I did too. You just chose the right thing. From then on, clients came through referrals. A 72-year-old woman whose daughter wanted to sell her house. A 65-year-old woman whose grandson was withdrawing money from her account. A 70-year-old woman whose new, 20 years younger husband demanded to be a co-owner. The stories were different, but the common denominator was the same. Older women were implicitly targeted, expected to surrender their authority, and we, I, Gloria, sometimes joined by Monique, taught them how to fight back. 6 months after starting, we were invited to speak at the Manhattan Community Center, a workshop on elder abuse and financial rights. About 50 people, mostly women. Has anyone here ever been told they are too old to understand something? I asked. Almost everyone raised a hand. Have you ever let others, children, grandchildren, a partner, manage your finances for convenience? Many hands went up again. Has anyone felt like they were becoming invisible? This time, nearly the entire room. I understand, I said, because I have been there. I told my story, this time with a year of distance, so the patterns emerged more clearly. Nyla didn't start with poisoning. She started with small words. At your age. Let us take care of it. You seem confused. Little by little, she eroded my self-confidence. That is gaslighting, and it always goes hand in hand with ageism. I looked around the room. What I need you all to remember, age is not a disease. 60, 70, 80 does not mean incapable. You have experience, wisdom, and the right to control your own life. After the talk, people lined up. Dorothy, 75, held my hand. My daughter keeps telling me to move in with her. She says I can't live alone anymore. But I love my apartment. I love my independence. Am I being selfish? No, I replied firmly. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is self-respect. If you are safe and want to live alone, that is your right. Dorothy wept softly. Thank you. I needed to hear that. In the following months, life settled into a new rhythm. In the morning, I walked in Central Park with Gloria and the group, 3 times a week, 6 o'clock, 3 miles around the reservoir. Sharon showed off pictures of her grandchildren. Tanya taught new breathing exercises, sometimes laughing, sometimes in warm silence. In the afternoon, I worked at Silver Voices, consulting, reviewing finances, teaching workshops. Every woman we helped was a small victory against a system that treated older people as invisible. In the evening, I painted. My watercolors were still not great, but they were improving. I painted the sea, sunrises, the moments that brought me peace. On Fridays, I met with Dr. Chen, continuing to peel back the deep layers of trauma, learning to trust again, learning to establish healthy boundaries. 9 months after the trial, I felt it was time. I texted Marcus. Coffee? Saturday, 2 o'clock, same place. He replied immediately, Yes. Thank you, Mom. I'll be there. Same place was the small cafe near Columbia, where I used to take Marcus during college. The same wooden corner table by the window with filtered sunlight. Marcus arrived 5 minutes early, standing and waiting, looking anxious. When I walked in, he stood up. He looked different, thinner, more mature, a few gray strands at his temples. Mom, his voice trembled. Marcus. We sat down. The silence was strange, not entirely comfortable, but no longer hostile. Thank you for meeting me, he began. You look better, I said. Not entirely true, but he seemed aware. I'm trying. Therapy helps a lot. I've learned a lot about myself, and not all of it is easy to hear. Like what? He took a deep breath. I was afraid of you aging. Afraid that one day you would need me, and I would have to be responsible. So when Nyla said you needed help, a part of me wanted to believe it, because if I controlled everything now, before things got worse as I imagined, I would be less afraid of the future. He paused, wiping his eyes. But you didn't need it. You weren't sick. You were just 62 years old. I projected my selfish fear onto you and nearly destroyed you. I remained silent for a long time. Do you know, I finally said, the most painful thing wasn't that you didn't believe me, but that you made me doubt myself. The times I stood in front of the mirror asking if I was losing my mind, the nights I checked the lock 5 or 6 times because I no longer trusted my memory. That is what you and Nyla took from me, my trust in myself. Marcus broke down. Mom, I'm sorry. I am so sorry. I know, I said gently, and I understand in part. You were manipulated too, but you are an adult. You had a choice. Each time you chose to believe her over me. Yes, and I will have to live with that. We sat quietly, sipping coffee. Finally, I asked, have you asked me anything yet? Asked you what? You haven't asked how I'm living. You only talk about yourself, about whether I can forgive. He paused, then nodded. Are you okay? Where are you living? What are you doing? For the first time, I told my son about my new life, the bright apartment, silver voices, the talks, the women we help, the watercolor class, the walking group, a life no longer centered around caring for others, but around honoring myself. Marcus listened, truly listened, without interrupting, without making the story about him. When I finished, he smiled, sad but genuine. Mom, you sound happy. I am happy, I admitted. Happier than I thought was possible, after everything. I'm glad for you. We stood up. Before leaving the cafe, Marcus hesitated. Do you think, one day, you can forgive me? I looked straight into my son's eyes. I don't know yet. But I think in time, we can move forward, not returning to how things were, but building something new based on honesty and respect. I'll take that, he said quietly. Anything you're willing to give. We walked out onto the pavement. Before turning in separate directions, I did something I hadn't done in almost a year. I hugged my son. The hug was short, still tentative, but it was a start. Forgiveness may not have arrived today, but autonomy has returned. When we choose healing over being defined by our wounds, every relationship, even the one with ourselves, has a chance to be reborn. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment. What part of the healing journey impressed you the most? I will continue to share stories of courage, boundaries, and personal freedom.